Hey everyone, so good to be here. Excited to be talking about this. In preparation for this talk, I realised basically that a really good way to test for how the world really thinks involves trawling through the Facebook feeds of your mum's friends. Hear me out here. I found once you get past sort of scrolling past an essay's worth of celebration about your daughter's grade 3 clarinet distinction, you scroll till your thumb aches past Candy Crush invitations, there are some works of literary genius for you to find. Some examples I'm about to throw up. Here's one. A picture backgrounded by a stunning mountain range, the words "Life is peaceful, be happy." Thank you to Deborah from down the road. Another one, a picturesque beach, and these profound words: "Happiness comes in waves, it will find you again." Thanks to Julia from Mum's yoga class for that. And here, the matter-of-fact poetry from Teresa from down the road. Everyone wants happiness, no one wants pain, but you can't have a rainbow without a little rain. Profound. So, I'm not telling you this to expose publicly my own Facebook stalking habits, but I wonder actually if much of our existence as human beings happens through the repetition of short mantras like these to ourselves. We drill them in because they resonate, we're desperate to live by them, and they can actually significantly alter the course of our lives, I think. How many times have you taken some extra precautionary action, maybe double locked the door, maybe bought some extra travel insurance because someone said the words to you, better safe than sorry, or maybe it's something like you're just unable to get off your butt and do that thing that you really need to get done, and someone says to you, probably a parent, let's be honest, at a time like the present, it's patronising, but it resonates, and you live the mantra out. And so what I think Deborah, Julia, Teresa do to help us is share a few variants of a super simple mantra for the whole of your life that many of us live by, and I suggest it's got a far more profound impact than the ones I've just described. In my experience, the mantra tends to rear its head in the grit of tough decision making when we're asking questions of ourselves like, what university am I going to go to? How will I be successful in life? How often do we hear these 5 words as a response? Do what makes you happy. And I have to be honest with you, when I reflect on the big decisions that I made in my life, that piece of advice has concretely affected my life in important ways. And I think it's because the idea of doing what makes me happy obviously resonates so strongly, and I live it out. Philosophers recognise the do what makes you happy mantra for your life, definitely. Politicians recognise it, we see that in our political discourse. And it's interesting because the do what makes you happy mantra was really part and parcel of the 1960s hippie counterculture. And in that world, it sort of expressed a resistance against the system, right? The structures and the corporations that enslaved us. That was what it was there to do. In our world now, huge brands like Coca-Cola exploit this happiness mantra in their multi-million-pound advertising to keep drip-feeding you with their sugar. It's funny how that's changed, and we can no longer call it a legitimate form of resistance, I think. My mum's friends are certainly hardly the hippie revolutionaries of 2019, other than perhaps Julia from yoga. They're expressing widely held beliefs, and if this vision for life is anything, it's not revolutionary. But I want to make this clear. It's self-evident that we like being happy. The point of this talk isn't going to be, try and be more sad. No, of course not. Happiness is great. Let's celebrate it when it comes. But what I want to ask is, are our lives going to be solely focused on happiness as an end goal? Is the mantra of do what makes you happy going to dictate our lives and hopefully satisfy us? And I've basically got my reservations, and 3 in particular I'm going to talk about in this talk. I think the mantra for your life is unhelpfully escapist. I think it's exclusive, and I think it sets you in this weird economy where everyone around you is a competitor and a fellow consumer, which is really damaging. And so, after I've highlighted those issues, I just want to, at the end of this talk, we're at an event run by Christians. I hope you'll forgive me for contrasting it with another mantra that you might live your life by. And it's one spoken by Jesus of Nazareth, who Christians believe to be God. And he says to you and me, my peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. So, there's a ton of things, right, that we talk about needing in life. One I frequently hear talked about is the need to get away. Every so often, a certain level of discontent just bubbles up inside us, I think, and spills over. We look at the people around us, the conversations happening around us, the buildings around us perhaps, and we say, I need to get out, I need to get away. Perhaps maybe you're literally having this right now in the middle of fifth week, or at the end of a long Oxford term. And so what do we do in that situation? I think many of us will open up Ryanair.com, search for the cheapest flight to somewhere, anywhere to get us out, and before we know it, we're on a 4-day excursion to an Eastern European city that we probably hadn't heard of before. And now suddenly the primary concern is what? Not the pain and stress of your day-to-day life, but it's like trying to feign interest in a culture that you didn't know you cared about. But it's okay. You realise you're on holiday, you escape, you make it, and it actually becomes clear, I think, in those moments, once you get away, that your happiness is connected with escape, is connected with getting away. I think something similar happens in a culture of drug use, actually, that's a particular part of life at universities. If there's any drug that forces you to be happy, it's MDMA, right? I study theology at uni, and so that means I know a reputable scientific study when I see one. That's a joke. It's something I read about MDMA in the respected scientific journal, The Daily Mash, which may be the most respected journal in the history of all scientific journals. It says this: a global study of human happiness has found that the single biggest factor is whether you are on MDMA. Researchers at the Institute for Studies found that factors such as family, relationships, career, exercise were far less important than having recently consumed the entheogenic party drug. Professor Henry Brubaker said, people on MDMA seem to be happy regardless of whether they're earning a lot of money, have good health, or a wide social circle. They are quite simply loving it. 27-year-old MDMA user Tom Logan said, I feel brilliant. When asked if having recently swallowed a folded up Rizzler full of powdered MDMA was a major factor in his happiness, Logan replied, it's definitely played a part. 31-year-old Emma Bradford said, I've recently become a parent for the first time. It's a great feeling, but to be honest, it's not up there with being really mashed at a rave. Now, let me be clear, I'm by no means advocating taking MDMA, but I think this article does two really funny and helpful things. One, it shows, again, this link between the pursuit of happiness and escaping. Taking ecstasy is obviously a way to get around your problems, away from removing yourself from a situation and removing the problem often of your own unwanted conscience. Same with alcohol or other drugs, perhaps. Getting immediately happy equates to escaping. But second, I like that article because I think it shows how absurd the promise of a happy escape is. While getting high on MDMA might just feel like the purest pleasure imaginable at the time, there is a catastrophic crash down to earth. Not just a hangover the next day, not just a memory of all the weird stuff that you've done, but confronting the reality of all your problems again, the fact that you just couldn't make them disappear. And so all this brings us to what's a much debated philosophical problem, known as Nozick's experience machine. And Nozick's this guy makes up this thought experiment and asks, okay, if an experience machine existed, we could plug ourselves into, and it would just generate for us a pure, unfiltered happiness for the rest of our life through simulated experiences, while we kind of forgot our present existence, whether we would in fact do that. Interestingly, again, it shows the link between escape and happiness, and in this case it's not just a geographical escape, it's not going to Slovakia for 4 days, it's a whole life escape that's necessary for this pure, perpetual bliss. I don't know what your response to that is. I imagine most of us would feel reluctant to plug in immediately. I'm not going to jump into the philosophy, I'm certainly not qualified to do that, but what I want to suggest is that isn't it bizarre that this is actually a question? At the heart of this philosophical problem is essentially the question, would you like to live a life of pure, unfiltered happiness? Which, according to this mantra, if we back it, the do what makes you happy mantra, surely our answer has to be an immediate yes. And yeah, I think many of us in the room would probably be reluctant to say yes immediately were we posed with this in real life. And so if that is the case, is it really so simple to say that a life lived in the pursuit of happiness is a life well lived? I think probably not. The thing is, the happiness part sounded great, didn't it? But if we take the do what makes you happy mantra seriously, we'll live our lives on the run. While rather than choosing to come to terms with the trauma of parents who neglected us, rather than choosing to come to terms with the trauma of being bullied at school, rather than looking at our pain in the eye and confronting it, we will live our lives on the run. And this philosophy of escapism, because I think that's what it is, as opposed to one primarily of happiness. It works okay for some who have the right mindset. It means they go to an Airbnb in Bratislava for 4 days. But for those of us who have tendencies towards anxiety and depression, I think an escapist attitude can have much sadder consequences. A life trying to escape is not one any of us, I think, wants to live. Our pain and our struggles have been too meaningful to just abandon and forget. And so I think we're left asking, really, is there a way to journey through the pain that's inevitable to this life and flourish at the same time rather than escape it? Second, exclusive. So as well as pointing out this escapism that's tied up with the do what makes you happy mantra, I also want to say how exclusive it is. And I find it to be really inconsistent, actually, with our understanding of every human being as inherently valuable and worthy of respect and dignity. To use the pursuit of happiness as a guiding principle for your life is essentially to say the happier you are, the better you are living your life. If you're not managing to get happy through your actions, you're doing something wrong. And living well, then, is this premium that only gets afforded to those with the resources to do so. The cash, the health, the friends, to be happy. And so not only does the pursuit of happiness tell the poor, the sick, the lonely, that they're under-resourced and lacking in something, which frankly they don't need to be reminded of, also tells them that they're spectacularly failing. Surely, then, a generous, fair way of living, which rings truer to each of us, I think, and says to people in hardship, is one that says to people in hardship that they have the opportunity to actually live well, regardless of the possibility for them to make themselves happy. Here's a miserable fact for our Friday lunchtime. I don't want to be flippant here at all, but the do what makes you happy mantra means that many of us in this room will live lives that are failures. I really hope, obviously, that all of us can go through life cruising from one pleasure to the next, and that we'll, on the whole, be able to avoid real tragedies. Maybe some of us in the room will be able to, on our deathbeds, look back at our lives and say, yeah, okay, on the whole, that was a happy one. But there will be people in this room who, in our last moments, will reflect on our lives and realise, actually, on the whole, it wasn't happy. Some of us may fall short of the job that we've always wanted. Some of us may have life-changing illnesses. Some of us will get deep scars from relationships that go badly wrong. Some of us will have lies believed about us for the entirety of our lives. And ultimately, some of us, and to be honest, many, many more outside this room who don't at least have an Oxford degree to fall back on, will spend far longer weeping than they do laughing. There are some uncontrollables in life that do what makes you happy isn't going to save you from. And so, in a way, our question today, is there more to life than being happy? It does have, in a sense, an obvious answer. Yes, there's more to life than being happy. There's being sad, there's grief. And the do what makes you happy mantra doesn't just say that grief is undesirable, it quite coldly reduces it to failure. I work in a community of people with learning disabilities, like I mentioned before, and I worry what this would mean for them, many of whom are frequently anxious, distressed, and frustrated with their situation. What does it say to them? Surely there's a way of living, of being that permits vulnerable and hurting people who will spend years, maybe decades, unable to get happy, to live well. And in fact, scaled up to society, a society committed to the individual pursuit of happiness, creates this elitist system, I think, that exposes and finger points at the most needy. And so what we saw as a cute little poem in front of a rainbow before, I think actually represents quite a damaging and callous outlook of life. Okay, lastly then, so the sole pursuit of happiness mistreats the hurting ones amongst us, but I also want to say that it mistreats you as an individual. Studies are pretty clear actually that our personal happiness is like inextricably linked to the happiness of those around us. And there was this study done at the University of Bonn in 2007, where basically they sat a bunch of people down, they had a load of dots on a screen in front of them, and people were asked, okay, if you can correctly count the number of dots that are on the screen in front of you, you'll get a monetary reward, and it'll be between, I think, something like 30 euros and 120 euros, I think. So let's say I'm sat down, I'm told if I get it right, I'm getting 30 euros, someone next to me, they're getting 60 euros. And I'm aware that they're going to get 60 euros if they get it correctly. That's how it kind of worked. They found some really interesting stuff. First, they found there's a reward system in the brain, the ventral striatum. I know I'm saying that right because I read the daily math regularly. It gets activated when an individual succeeds, and its activity subsides when failure happens. Maybe that's pretty obvious, but two more important things happen. First, activity in the reward center of the brain was much higher than average when you succeed and your co-player doesn't. Secondly, activation in the reward system of your brain was greater when you succeeded, your co-player succeeded, but you knew that you were getting more money than them, as opposed to the same amount. All that really is to say that our personal happiness isn't this object that we just pick up, take for ourselves, and it has no bearing on the world. It seems to me to be much more like a currency, where our gain is often at the loss of others. That's just how we're wired. And to be honest, I probably don't need some neurological experiment to prove that to you. Maybe if you're in first year, you won't have experienced this yet, but the rest of us, the joy of getting a good collection result back is perhaps unparalleled. But isn't there this extra dollop of sweetness when you find out that not only did you do well, but your tube partner who'd been kissing the bum of your tutor for the past 8 weeks has got a worse mark? I've been in that situation a few times and loved it. And there it is in something quite shallow. But probably this translates to life more broadly. When you leave Oxford, whether you want to be this person or not, you'll start engineering conversations to get everyone sharing what university they went to, and you'll be able to pull out your ace. When we start relationships or get married, we'll mentally repeat reasons to ourselves why our partner is better than any other partner in the history of humankind. When we'll start thinking about how much more higher achieving our kids are than other people's kids, we'll think about how much more genuine our friendships are than other people's, all because it makes us feel better, it makes us feel happier. And of course, hopefully we'll grow into more mature ways of thinking about this stuff. But comparison will always be there when it comes to the pursuit of happiness. I think it's inseparable. And so what I'm saying is we end up in this kind of economy of happiness, which is about getting what we can and climbing over others in the process. And if you're going to live your life in an economy like that, I don't think it will treat you like the unique, precious human being that you are. It will treat you as a consumer and as a competitor. It will convince you of the lie that there's a scarcity of the things that we really need. And it will convince you into thinking that it's better to keep, protect whatever you've got than it is to give it away. And it gets exhausting, I think, having to approach life as a competition. It gets exhausting having to be jealous of your friends. And it can be really crippling to think about the possibility that all the stuff that made you happy, i.e. everything you value in life, could just disappear like that. That'll make you paranoid over time, I think, and will chip away at your soul. So, Jesus' peace. We've seen that the pursuit of happiness as a philosophy for life is problematic, and that's a means for escape. It's exclusive. It puts you in an economy that will exploit and deceive you. What I'm going to say is that life, according to the mantra of Jesus, who, anticipating his death, says to his followers, "My peace I leave with you, my peace I give you." It's a gift, and Jesus says to me, you and me, stop thinking about your life as something to escape. Stop thinking about your life as something to win, but start thinking about it as a gift that starts and ends with me giving you my peace. But a quick summary of what happens when we take Jesus' words here seriously. My peace I leave you, my peace I give you. We identify ourselves with the story of Jesus, a first century Jew who taught about peace, who wouldn't shut up about God's kingdom of peace, who enacted justice wherever he went, who amongst oppressed women, amongst the racially marginalised, amongst the economically poor, amongst the societally despised. And though God, he never resorted to violence, but let himself be hung and killed on a cross in solidarity with broken people who crave an end to wrongdoing, exploitation and violence. He wins out, ultimately rises from the dead, ascends to heaven, and what does he leave behind? The gift of his peace. My peace I leave you, my peace I give you. There's no target to hit with this, it's just a level playing field, and everyone gets to play. So, two ways it's unique. One way I think Jesus' peace is unique is that unlike happiness, it's not primarily a feeling. Of course we can talk about like feeling a bit zen, or I don't know, feeling peace through that, or the feelings of peace we get through smashing through a course on headspace. But I'm not talking about that kind of thing, I'm talking about an objective state of affairs. When wars end, we can say that peace has concretely been made because conflict has ceased, there's an opportunity for restored relationship between nations. To say a situation between two nations after a war has been made happy doesn't really cut it. It's based on subjective individual feelings that will waver. And I think that Jesus' peace is the same. It doesn't waver with your feelings. It is just there. It's a state of peace between you and God, you and the world. And another thought about Jesus' peace. Oh, I'm supposed to be doing that. That was not a feeling. Second thought about Jesus' peace. Forgiveness is central to it. Jesus could bring peace to a world that despised and killed him because and only because he offered it forgiveness. He offers forgiveness for systemic and structural evil that pervades our world, but he also offers forgiveness to you and me as individuals. And that's strange, right? Because often it doesn't really feel like we need to be forgiven. In fact, it can feel quite insulting to be told that we need to be forgiven. But I promise you, the forgiveness of Jesus, it promises itself, in fact, to be non-condemning, to be non-judgmental. It won't point the finger at you, it won't posture in superiority over you. But there's just a simple opportunity with Jesus' peace to recognize any lingering guilt and shame in our lives, as much as we're able to, and be freed from it. Because in his death, Jesus says that he'll take that for you. So, we saw before, didn't we? The pursuit of happiness was escapist, exclusive, and economic. I just want to contrast that to end with the peace of Jesus. First, so even when happiness is an impossibility for people, peace can be known and can be pursued when it's like this, when it's like Jesus' peace. Life doesn't have to be a failure, but can be done well by anyone. It's not an exclusive way of living. Even in the depth of misery, there is always the possibility to flourish, so it's not exclusive. Equally, this kind of peace lets you relate to the people around you in a totally new way, I think. Not as competitors, but as friends and as neighbours. In January, I realised for a while that I've been having constant nightmares, not eating much, being focused, feeling like unexplainably hopeless, really. I gave my mum a ring for perhaps like the 10th time one week, and she just suggested that I might be depressed and that I should speak to a doctor about it. She was right, I did speak to the doctor. That turned out to be the case for a whole ton of reasons that I probably need a whole therapy session to go through with you about. But one thing I noticed during this time is that, okay, if comparison is a normal everyday issue, then it gets ramped up so badly when you're feeling depressed. Your feelings of hopelessness increase when you start envying the people around you who have got things together, who, in my case, were on impressive grad schemes, who developed really wide social circles. They just seem to have things together and I didn't. And I have to say, at the heart of my transformation since then, I'm really glad to have come through that, has been a real sense of the peace of Jesus. Not because it cured me, not because remembering it made me feel happier in my lowest moments, but because it gave me a very real framework for my life, basically, where competition wasn't on the table anymore. And the exhaustion of my own jealousy, I was able to put aside. Because when life is framed by God, it is just easier to be at peace with people who are doing better than me, even want the best for them, and to see them as my friends and my neighbours. And lastly, if escapism was the problem with the pursuit of happiness, I really believe it's categorically not when we live in the peace of Jesus. Jesus, who experienced rage, grief, anxiety, the lot, understands the fragility that you and I feel. And he will lead us through the pain of that. He won't tend us towards escape, but he'll lead us through it to forgiveness. I don't know if you saw this in the news recently. A policewoman named Amber Geiger in America was sentenced to 10 years in prison for shooting dead a black man named Botham Jean, and he was just hanging out in his own flat, minding his own business at the time. She claims it was a mistake, that she had thought he was an intruder in her home, but a whole bunch of dodgy stuff came to light, including the fact she had a history of sending racist texts from her phone. Those sorts of incidents, as we all know, are horrifically common in the US. But it made our news because a video emerged of Brant Jean, the brother of Botham Jean, in court a few minutes after the verdict was passed, telling Amber Geiger that he forgave her. He said this: "I love you just like anyone else. I'm not going to say I hope you rot and die, just like my brother did, but I personally want the best for you. I wasn't going to ever say this in front of my family or anyone, but I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you, because I know that's exactly what Botham would want. And the best would be give your life to Christ." Brant then walked across the room to hug Geiger, and they both held each other and wept for minutes. How was that extraordinary act possible for Brant? I think it's because there in his grief, he just knew the peace of Jesus. He got it, and he knew it to be a gift that needed sharing. Because the life of peace that Jesus brings is not an escape, but it means receiving and giving concrete and occasionally outrageous forgiveness, as well as actually bringing the possibility of friendship into division and pain. And I know for myself that when life really starts to crumble around me, I don't need like Bill Gates levels of wealth and resources to generate some more happiness for myself. I need branching levels of peace. So yeah, I'm saying this, in our lives there's one hollow life mantra, I think, that relies solely on your self-generation of happiness. And there's another mantra given by Jesus of Nazareth that is grounded in a peace that's already there for you. I've repeated it a million times by now. Jesus says to you, "My peace I leave you, my peace I give you." And I'm struck by those words that there's no invitation to us today. There's no option put on the table before us. There is simply an insistence over our lives. Jesus' peace is given to us. There's no RSVP. Your seat at his table is already prepared. He doesn't request that you meet him in the middle. He doesn't need you to grovel all the way back to him. He certainly doesn't need you to get your life together. A seat at Jesus' table is with the poor, the powerless, and those who frankly never got it together. But he's at that table, he's there waiting, and he's ready for your friendship. Thanks very much.